Yes. Sue Miller. Okay. All right. Sue Miller. Great. Patrick Allen is excused. Martha Brooks, do we still have you on the phone?
You do?
Thank you. Donalda Dodson?
Yes.
Great. Colt Gill is excused. Holly Marr is excused. Farah Paxaresh is excused. Eva Ripito, were you able to join us? Okay. Shauna Rodriguez is excused. Donna Schnittker?
Here.
Perfect. Terry Talhofer? Kali Thornlad, were you able to join us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Bobby Weber?
Here.
Miriam Calderon?
Here.
And then for our advisors, do we still have Kate Wilcox?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Do we have Kim Fredlin from DHS?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Thank you. Candace Pelt?
I'm here.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you, guys. Great turnout.
All right. Yes, great turnout. Thanks, everybody, for being there. How about if we find out who else is in the room with you, Alyssa and Miriam?
Yep. Yes, we have, they're not near mic, so I'll introduce them. We do have David Mandel here with us, as well as Ann Morrison, who will be presenting, and Sherry Santabanez, who will be helping us today.
Yep.
And
And I think we have Dawn Taylor on the line.
we've still got Don Taylor on the phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Anyone we missed on the line?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So council members, since this is virtual, you can, send texts if you want to get into the conversation or just interrupt. But a lot of the meeting today, as you know from the agenda, are presentations from staff. So it will probably be wise to let the staff go through their presentations and then try to hold our questions till the end. And then we'll negotiate who's talking when. So let's start with the consent agenda, and the only, the only item on that is that recommendations from Best Beginnings that we add another member to their committee. And Martha, do you want to present that recommendation?
Yes, I do. Her name is Karen Kasher, and she is from next door. She's a program manager in one of our smaller HFO programs, and that would round out a small, medium, and large representative for the HFA requirements that we have to have for accreditation. So would you want a motion now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Martha, and then we'll discuss it.
Okay. I move that we approve Taryn Conisher for a temporary assignment to the Best Beginnings Committee.
All right, is there a second for that motion?
Just Donalda, I'll second that.
Any discussion from council members?
This is Terry. I work with Karen. She serves the 5 counties of our hub, and I think she'll be a great addition, so I'm very excited.
Great.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thanks. I'm glad that you know her, Terry. Okay, let's go ahead then, and we will vote on the motion to appoint Karen Tauscher to the Best Beginnings Committee. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right. Karen is officially a member. I appreciate her being willing to serve on that committee. Then, Miriam, would you like to give us your director's report, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Miller. Alyssa is projecting now. So on your screen, you'll see director's report, and we will also post copies of this, so as part of the regular meeting materials. But sort of a brief report. First, I wanted to share a bit about the Childcare Deserts report that the Early Learning Division commissioned Oregon State University to do for us. The title of the report that was released last week was Oregon's Childcare Deserts, Mapping Supply by Age Group, Metropolitan Status, and Percentage of Publicly Funded Slots. So it was an effort and a partnership to understand the current supply of childcare across Oregon, particularly looking at our supply for infants and toddlers. We know that it's really important for us sort of internally to guide the work of our, in particular, licensing and quality improvement teams. We know this is also a very relevant and timely report as we think about the session and the interest in and the governor's agenda around new investments. Really want to thank the authors, Megan Pratt, Michaela Seckman, and our very own Bobby Weber for their work on this. We are hearing also feedback from our community partners, so Childcare Resource R&Rs and hubs, that their data for their own communities is really helpful. And we know that there has been some real media interest around the report. Megan Pratt and I got to last week speak to OPB on Think Out Loud about some of the findings, and Melanie here at the Early Learning Division has been tracking some of the sort of more local articles. Again, people I think are looking at the data more for their own communities, and so we've seen some of that coverage. I think we also appreciated the opportunity to be able to coordinate with Oregon State University in terms of the release and really making sure that together we disseminated it kind of far and wide across our state. So that was the first thing. Second thing I wanted to touch on was legislative session. It's an agenda item that we have later to talk about. So I'll keep it very brief just to say that this week I finished my introductory presentation to the Education Subcommittee for Joint Ways and Means. So that was really the sort of longer overview presentation. If you'd like to view that, where we talked really about the ELD's work, the Early Learning Council's work. I'm really talking about our overall agency budget and the programs that we administer. We know that, and we have continued, myself and colleagues here at the Early Learning Division, to continue presenting to the Joint Committee for Student Success, Early Childhood Subcommittee, again, about a number of issues related to preschool, childcare, the birth to 5 workforce, infant and toddler programs, and home visiting. That work has been ongoing as well since we last met. I did also want to share, and again, we can talk more in depth about this during the legislative session portion of our update, but we have heard that the Joint Ways and Means Education Subcommittee will be hearing public testimony from early learning stakeholders on March 6th. And again, I know Alyssa does a great job of making sure council members all of these presentations are recorded and available on OLIS, so we can make the links available if you didn't get to catch some of these presentations before Ways and Means or the Joint Committee on Student Success, Early Childhood Sub. We can share those with you. I also wanted to touch briefly on a lead rules implementation update. And again, I'll keep this high level, but you'll see with the written copy some of the numbers here, but wanted to report back onto the council in terms of our progress in supporting providers and meeting the new requirements around lead testing. So as of February 26th, the OCC was licensing 3,773 facilities across registered family, and certified centers. Of those, 3,748 had submitted lead testing results or a mitigation strategy to the Office of Childcare. So 232 of the facilities that are in compliance are using alternative water source declarations as their mitigation strategy. We have, of the 3,748 facilities that have submitted less testing results, 48 have submitted results that indicate a failed faucet. So this means we have over 99% pass rates. And these facilities have submitted and implemented an OCC approved mitigation strategy. We have 26 facilities not in compliance currently. 7 of those facilities have an expiring license that won't be renewed, which are leaving 18 facilities currently that are not in compliance. They've received deadlines to submit lead testing results. Their licensing specialist is monitoring that closely, and if they do not meet the deadline, we'll move to sort of other enforcement action, including civil penalties. So we are continuing to track this and working on an analysis that we can share more about what some of the what we've learned through this process in terms of the areas where we need to support providers and coming into compliance. But I think moving forward, this is a part of all processing of new licenses and renewals. So we think we're in good shape moving forward. And I'll remind council members that because of some of the additional childcare discretionary federal dollars that we received, we're going to be able to cover the costs of lead testing for providers. So moving forward. Last, I wanted to just say briefly about hiring and recruitment. This month, the division welcomed Lois Thali as a senior operations analyst. Some of you on the council may remember Lois, who was our budget analyst at the Oregon Department of Education. I know that at my first council meeting, she was presenting and helping us understand some of the different options about the Early Learning Hub funding formula. So we are thrilled to have Lois back in this role here at the Early Learning Division, where she will be working as with Nikisha and our other leadership program managers around supporting budgets, to also be doing a lot of work around supporting our responsibilities around CCDF as the lead agency. And I will note that we are in the final stages of our recruitment for a deputy director. So I will hopefully have an update at the next council meeting as to filling that important role. So that's all that I have. Any questions?
Yes, any questions from council members about any part of that report? I guess I would just say that I'm sure we all agree we appreciate the child care office really focusing on the lead testing and seeing that we are getting those facilities in compliance. So I think that's a very positive report. So thanks, Dawn, to you and your staff.
Can I ask a quick question? This is Kelly.
Yes, sure.
Beyond civil penalties, is there anything else that can be done to prevent them from operating? Maybe civil penalties is preventing them from operating. I'm not clear. Like if they're out of compliance and it's a potential danger to kids, like can they be shut down for this, or is it not? Is that not an option? I see that the ones that are their license is going to expire that we're not renewing, but I'm wondering about the other 7. Or the other 18, sorry.
Yeah, Kelly, I'll I'll respond. I'll ask Dawn also to weigh in as well. I mean, typically we go through progressive enforcement. So, we start with kind of civil penalties. After, particularly, we've done a pretty extensive sort of technical assistance process. So I think at this point we have a really good understanding around what some of the issues are. So we start with civil penalties. We don't immediately go up to, stronger action on a license, but usually some of that enhanced monitoring, additional communication with the provider, and civil penalties often helps to bring people into a compliance. But I don't think that's we would be sort of prohibited in any way in terms of continuing to escalate the actions that we take if somebody is refusing. Up until taking a more serious action on their license. But Dawn, anything you want to say about? I just wanted to be clear, we don't sort of kind of jump to that. There's a progressive enforcement process that we follow.
No, Miriam, I think that covers it well. That's where we're going through our full progressive enforcement for those who are not coming into compliance. And so we'll incrementally go through those steps, which may ultimately end with an intent, to remove a license, but we'll go through that process.
Yep. And Kelly, providers also have, hearing rights when we issue intent. So, it can be a pretty lengthy process before
All right. Thank you.
it's taken. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Obviously, we'll hear more about the legislative agenda in just a little bit later in our agenda.
This is Bobby, and it may be too early, but is there going to be an analysis that shows what kind of barriers getting lead testing has presented, or which types of providers or characteristics of providers were associated with struggling with it? Is there anything there that we should be concerned about, or from a policy level about the impact of lead testing?
Yeah, Bobby, we have been tracking that and doing that analysis. So I think we can bring that back to the council at a later time. We've in terms of the discussions around the white paper. I think we've shared previously with the council. We saw language barriers in terms of the capacity of the labs. Not being able to have information in other languages other than English being a barrier. So we have been tracking some of those and have been working on a white paper that will help us, kind of understand both sort of the range of issues. We know there's been a lot of interest in in rolling out this regulation and understanding, what was as well, not just how many providers have come into compliance, but what was the scope of the issue? Was licensed childcare an area where we would have a lot of concern about children being exposed to water contaminated with lead? And I think what we have seen now that, we can say pretty confidently that among our licensed facilities, we did not see a high fail rate among the licensed facilities. So that is, very encouraging to note that we didn't have a huge issue there. I think we're also interested in understanding more analysis now that we've got their providers' sort of mitigation strategies in place, what their needs might be sort of longer term and analyzing those. So this is ongoing work that we're doing, but a lot of the emphasis has been really on, I think, the technical assistance to really help providers kind of come into compliance, and I think in particular navigate, troubleshoot, and really support some of those providers because of language barriers or other issues weren't getting their lead tests done.
I'll just note, we mentioned last month we applied for a federal grant. We still haven't heard back, but if we do receive some funds, some of that would be able to help, particularly with the barriers we've heard about with the labs and being able to offer supports in a language other than English. So we'll let you know, hopefully by next meeting, if we've received any grant funding around that as well.
Yep, thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Dawn, anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay, great.
Okay, then let's move on with our agenda and get an update on the childcare temporary rules timeline. So back to you, Dawn.
And yeah, actually, I will be doing this. It's a little strange. Our display just went out, so apologies. I'm talking to the void right now. Oh yeah, I think I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got. Yeah. So as you all remember, in January we provided an update on our process to make the temporary rules that have been passed by the council starting in I think last June through November permanent. You'll see a update on, or a description of which temporary rules we are asking to make permanent. We opened up public comment period following the council meeting in January. Public comment will be accepted on these rules until the 21st of March. And we would be back to provide an update on any public comment that we have and to request adoption by the council at the March 28th meeting. This just gets us in under the deadline to make sure that our earliest temporary rules remain in effect and don't sort of expire before we're able to make them permanent. We also have a hearing for the set that affects the center certified family and registered family rules. This is also to make sure that any request of a hearing wouldn't put us in jeopardy of creating expired rules and then having to make them permanent later on. We don't expect too much comment, but we wanted to offer that because we know there's a lot going on with the rules, and that testimony, may be informative in how these rules get promulgated. Any questions?
Just a quick comment from Sue. I appreciate the fact that the hearing is after normal work hours, so 6 o'clock in the evening, hopefully making it accessible for people and providers. Okay, any questions? I assume that was Anne who was speaking. Am I correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
All we can see are the backs of your head. So,
Gotta readjust next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you, Anne. Appreciate that update.
Sure thing.
We will discuss this more in March. So Raise Up Oregon implementation. This is a very exciting part of every agenda. I'm sure that we're going to be seeing council members and measuring success. We're fortunate that Bobby has stepped in to be the interim chair of that committee while Holly is out on maternity leave. And I just have to say, this is a very, very exciting report, I believe, that's in our packets. What a ton of work is being done by this committee and the staff to it. So take it away, Bobby and David. And I love this first slide. Flower.
This is Bobby, and I'm starting, and David is going to be joining in as we move forward. And this first slide I also love. and it does a couple of things. It shows the direct connection between raising Oregon's strategic plan and the measuring success, sharing this cross-sector commitment. And what this slide shows is the full involvement of the system and who is participating from each of the sectors in the measuring success. And I don't think I have to show, you can see the names, but it's Holly chairs this committee. She's home it's Gabrielle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, she's home with the baby, and we'll be coming back and taking back chairing the committee. But we've had full engagement, and it's important for a couple of reasons. One, because of the commitment to creating measures that are relevant to the host system, but also because the dashboard that we're moving toward is going to belong to all the sectors. And so it's critical in two ways. One, that they own the measures in the sense that they are meaningful measures for that sector. And two, that they will actually be providing the data to keep the measures current over time, because this will be not only shared in design, but it will also be shared in implementation. And so I think, unless people have questions, we'll go on to the next slide. This is, you've seen this is the theory of change that's behind the work that Measuring Success is doing. It's that core belief of the Early Learning Council that there is no one sector or no one part of our society or our community that is going to be able to move us to a place where children thrive and families are supported. So the theory of change is and of which this is an activity moving us forward, is that the getting to agreement on the outcomes and involvement of all sectors, and that they'll be able to identify and articulate what they're doing and the progress that sector is making, and that there'll be this shared commitment at all levels that together we can change Oregon as a place in terms of well-being of children, young children and their families. And no questions.
I'll just add
Okay.
one piece that I think will be fleshed out in more when we get to the next slide. I think one of the sort of key pieces of this sort of the mechanics of this theory of change is that in order to really move these big outcomes that we really care about, we have to acknowledge that those really long-term shared true outcomes aren't owned by anyone, that they are things that everyone needs to take responsibility. But also as we're developing the more concrete layers of work, there also has an opportunity to make sure that all of the partners can also see the impact of their work in the measures. So I think that's something that you'll see that we've been trying to sort of balance those two pieces as we get to the next slide.
So, yeah, and following up, just the same kind of thinking that David just shared is the association between this work and the Raising Oregon Strategic Plan, which is inherent and kind of implied or built into what David was just saying. So the goals are shared by all sectors, and they will take not just the sectors, but all Oregonians to really make the changes necessary so that we achieve the goals. where now you're looking at the medium-term outcomes and the long-term outcomes. So we've got the three goals that, especially two of the three, that this process, the dashboard, the eventual dashboard, will be showing progress toward. So we've got long-term outcomes, and when we get into the library, you'll see some of the things that are emerging to measure there. Those will take 5 to 10 years to show clear progress. They're based on the whole population, not just who a program serves. And as we've said or shared across sectors, they're kind of ultimate. They're not program or process outcomes, and so they're directly tied to ready for kindergarten and healthy, stable, and attached families. Medium-term outcomes, the way the committee is moving forward is here we're thinking when you're looking at Raising Oregon, this was with our objectives. So I just would say this is not the implementation plan which is being developed and measuring strategies. What this is about is measuring progress toward achieving what we should have in the plan as objectives. And what you're going to see is how we have linked the selection of medium-term outcomes and associated them with the objectives. So with these, we expect to see change in 2 to 3 years. They can be sector or program specific if it ties to a construct that we or a specific objective in the plan. It's very important that these have buy-in from the sector owners. And as I said, that buy-in is in two ways. One, they think it's meaningful. They care about it. They're committed in their own work plan to making progress. And two, they're measuring it. So they'll be able to contribute the findings in order to, for the program, for the dashboard to show progress. And you can think of these as intermediate outcomes that contribute to the long terms. And I've already said we've gone through this process of aligning the strategic plan objectives and the medium-term outcomes. And one of the things we are trying to achieve for every measure that gets accepted is the ability to analyze it by demographic groups and to focus on not just does the service exist, but what is the quality. Those, we're not going to be able to achieve that all the time, but those are criteria we're using as we move forward in selecting which measures will be included. So, David, you want to add?
I think the only thing that I would add is, is we're sort of working on the development of the library sort of in parallel process to the council's strategic planning process. And there was sort of a big realization, when I guess it was in probably our December meeting after the plan had been adopted on November 30th, to be able to look at the objectives and think about the objectives as the sort of right level for organizing the dashboard. So I think in some sense you'll see what we've done has really been, so some of this work has really been sort of changed over the last couple of months, but really depended upon the adoption of the council of the plan and being able to have those objectives. And I think also what the objectives we're finding for the most part is that they're at the right level that still allows us to think about what are measures of outcomes, even more, although they're more short-term than the long-term outcomes, rather than sort of process measures, sort of what's the impact it's having on a group of kids or families, rather than counts of how many kids are in a specific service.
Right. So all of this is getting us to the core of our work. This may be a good place to stop and give credit to Tom George, the staff, ELD staff, who is supporting the work of this committee and all the sectors involved in it. He has just done an amazing job of linking people and keeping. So one image I have in my mind is we meet, but in between, Tom keeps the train moving forward. And so probably the most concrete project is, product for you to view is the measure library that we're creating, and this gives you an example. This is for children arrive ready for kindergarten goal, and you can see the long-term system measures that these are population level and the ones that are being considered. You can see them listed, but I want to go across. Then you see what data source there is, which is who's the data provider going to be, and who's doing the analysis of the data. Sometimes that's one and the same. Sometimes the same agency collects the data and does the analysis and will provide the findings. Sometimes they collect the data and Tom or somebody at ELD may end up doing the analysis. So so that's how to read the coding. I don't think we need to go through these. You can see they're all population level. They are the ones that we think will take years to make any change, any visible change, but they are directly tied to the kind of movement we're hoping to make as a society within Oregon. Then the intermediate measures, you can see this objective one, families are supported and engaged in their children, and you can see we're going to have we have not decided yet how many measures there'll be for each objective, or whether there'll be more measures for some and fewer for others. But this library means the committee is considering this as a viable measure. Not that this is going to be the measure, because we're not there yet, but these are the ones. So home visiting, some measures, some parenting education measures that are being captured by OPEC, and the Oregon Parenting Education Collaborative, and I don't know. These are just to give you examples because we're not going to go through them all. The second one, families have access to high quality, affordable childcare. We are looking at a supply access measure, spark measure, and continuity of care in the subsidy program. So I'll stop there. Not only David, but are there questions? Because this is the core of our work. This is what we do in meetings, and this is what we do between meetings, is to keep moving forward in identifying something that's meaningful, that's owned by a sector or more than one sector, and that we can feasibly put in the dashboard. So we're not going through all of them, although, Alyssa, the current, have all the council members received a copy of the library as it currently is in process?
I don't believe so. I have it here, and I'm happy to follow up with it electronically.
And then just to give you a sense of where we are in the process, we are still going through the library line by line and really even just sort of asking what additional questions or information do we need about each measure to be able to actually even assess it in a full way. And part of the process has also been bringing in experts and data owners to be able to have sort of a deeper dive conversation. So we had just I think in our January meeting, Bruce Shepard from ODE, who works with the Early Intervention, Early Childhood Special Ed, came in and spent, a good hour with the committee working through what data they collect and what's the strengths and weaknesses of the different measures that they have. So it's a fairly laborious process, I would also say.
Right. And we're in the process. That's a really good example of the process we're going through. So we think we're going to move towards social emotional measures that are captured in early intervention data, but there's 0 to 3, and then there's preschool. How many measures do we capture? Do we capture it for both age groups? Those are the kinds of decisions, if people want to join us, those are the kinds of conversations that we will be continuing to have at Measuring Success. Okay, the next slide, Alyssa.
So, hi, this is Kim. And I, first of all, just want to say that this is really impressive work, and I think is the work that will really help define all the strategies and implementation and what happens on the ground. And so, again, really impressive work, and I love it. I just wanted to comment about when I'm looking at the slide that talks about medium term versus long term, and I see that childhood poverty is listed as a medium term, which I understand you're looking to have improvement in 2 to 3 years. While I also am hopeful that that will happen, I think that that's a more long-term strategy.
Right. Thank you, Kim. I wasn't aware that we had it there, and so I'm going to, I'm going to make a note so that we look more carefully at it. Yep. Okay. Want to take us to, I think it's slide 6 now. There you go. But thank you for the support, the nice comments about the work of this group. So we've been looking at, and for us to be careful on the poverty measure. So we've been looking at the measures from multiple perspectives. And so what Tom has done is help us see the different perspectives and what the objectives look like. So the aim is that this collaborative effort will produce measures that really have meaning across the sectors and for helping us know what kind of progress we're making. So one perspective through which we're looking at the measures is developmental domain measures. So are we covering key developmental domains for the child and the family? And a second is what we've referred to a lot. Are we looking at it the way the different sectors look at it? So are we representing all sectors, and are they are these their key indicators? Is this what they have indicated is important to measure in Oregon? And then the third is, we've also referenced, is from a strategic plan perspective, are the measures relating to the objectives of the strategic plan? So that what Tom did for us in the next 3 slides is pull from it just examples of looking at the measures from the 3 perspectives. So we'll take the next one, which is developmental domain. So we've got the kindergarten readiness and the family goals at the top, and then examples of looking at different developmental domains. We've got the physical, perceptual, motor ones, social, emotional well-being, approaches to learning, cognitive language, and you can see there examples of long-term and medium-term measures. And then for family development, birth mother caregiver health, healthy relationships within the family, and safe and stable families. And again, you can see examples of long-term and medium-term measures that are related to those developmental domains. So I don't know if people have, these are just examples. This isn't a comprehensive, but we were just wanting to give you examples of looking at this work from more than one perspective, and this is from developmental domain.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just noticing, like, adequate birth weight. I know low birth weight is an issue in the African American community, but I also wonder if that's normalized against the white standard. Like, is there differences in birth weights for different ethnicities, and are we looking at it by ethnicity to see what is norm for that ethnic group? I just am curious.
So, Kali, I can't answer the specific on birth weight, but we will before we select it, because one of the criteria we're evaluating every measure on is can it be broken out by demographic groups. And I don't David, maybe you do. I don't happen to remember on adequate prenatal care and birth weight, all three of these.
Well, the adequate prenatal care is another one. I guess because those are squishier, like, whereas like well-child visits are straightforward, continuity of care, but birth weight, what do we define as adequate? Maybe that's kind of what you're in the process of looking at. The birth weight one I know fluctuates by ethnicity, and so that's why I had a question. But the adequate prenatal care, I would assume, there was another one that caught my eye, because my first thought was, well, what is defined as adequate? Have we laid out for folks what that is? Is it based on a particular standard? And is it something achievable for people across income spectrums? So, in terms of access to a hospital, or I don't know. So I was curious. And maybe we can have an offline conversation. Maybe now's not the time, but that are my wonderings.
Now, those are the kinds of questions the committee, David, maybe you can remember exactly. Adequate prenatal care is going to be an OHA measure, and probably with the Medicaid population would be my guess. Is that?
Hi, this is Kate.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Great. Can you answer
Hi. I can give you some information around the adequate prenatal care. There is a standard, a research-based standard that looks at not only the number of visits, but also the frequency. We're getting a little bit in the weeds, but just to give you the background, it's called the Kotelchuk Index, and it's used by public health practitioners as a way of assessing adequacy of prenatal care. And we can look at that. I believe we asked some of that information on our PRAMS survey. So PRAMS is for the Pregnancy Risk and Monitoring System. And so with that, we can look across the entire population, and we do have that by race and ethnicity. And so we can sort of look at see what's happening in terms of different communities, just as an example.
Thank you, Kate. And Kali, I mean, these are great questions, and you can the committee will welcome those kinds of questions, because it'll just enrich our deliberations.
Okay.
This is Danelle. Can I ask a question? Kate, on those measures, I know some of them, but do they include race and ethnic differences? For example, I know that in the Latino population, people use a lot of natural healers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That considered
and I think we need to, I don't know off the top of my head, but that's absolutely something that we can dive down into and look at. Yep.
Because otherwise it would look like they had no care, but they do have.
Right. And if you remember, the PRAM survey is self-reported. So if a woman feels like she's getting prenatal care, she would be writing that. She would be including that. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. The next perspective is sector. So what Tom has pulled out for us here is there's early care and education sector, and that might frequency of reading to children and some of the medium-term ones, and then you've got long-term K-12 ones coming out of that are looking at OKA, kindergarten attendance, third grade reading, housing. We've been so excited to have housing on this committee. I think that the medium-term one is going to be rent burden. That's the one that's so closely tied to child outcomes that having more than, I think it's more than 50% rent burden is, it has the same kinds of negative impacts as maternal health on a child. So anyway, we're looking at those, and housing is actively participating with us to be sure we can get the very best measure. You can see some of the health ones. We've already talked a little bit about them. And then human services, food security, again, rent, poverty, parenting, education, completeness were examples. But this is just to show we're constantly checking to be sure that we are getting the perspective of each sector, so that this is truly a product that will be owned by all the sectors. Any questions, or should we go to the next one? Or David, if you wanted to add?
No, I think we can go to the next one, yeah.
Okay. This one is exciting because this shows how, as we said in the earlier parts of this presentation, that we were so excited that meeting that we were mapping the emerging library to the objectives once the council had finalized the objectives. And we had been doing this iterative process and trying to stay in alignment, but it was pretty darn exciting when we were able to actually do the matching, and to see that the measures we were creating were directly able to be linked, were be able to link directly to the objectives that are in Raising Oregon. So you can see examples with the first three objectives of some of the items from the library, of the measures, and how they are linked to the plan objectives. David, do you want to add?
No, I think, Bob, I want to thank you for the great presentation on that. I think probably one of the questions is, so when are you guys going to be done? I think, to be honest, we probably have a minimum of 4 to 5 more months of sort of going through sort of line by line and bringing, additional folks into the meeting to sort of hear perspective. But I guess also my sense is it's also probably worth taking the time to do that.
The other thing that I'd like to kind of get on the table is this isn't a budgeted activity, and so we need to find somebody who's really good with web graphics, and so that when we get set up, anyway, that will be where it's not too early to get started thinking, in my mind. It's not too early for us to be thinking about how we're going to take this great work and make it truly accessible, and that's going to involve some good web graphics, or whatever the skill set is.
Right. Okay, Bobby, thank you so much for that presentation and that overview. And David, for your work on this, and Tom as well. I'm wondering if there are any questions. I think the comments, Kali and Donalda, that you've made, the questions you've raised are just a good reminder about the equity lens that we want to make sure we apply to everything that the council does. So thank you for just sort of pointing some light onto some of those issues. I'm wondering from other council members, questions, comments, how do you see these relating to the work that you're doing in your own fields?
This is Kim again, and I would just say, again, I think that this is really great work, and I look forward to continuing to see it as it evolves. And I wonder if we can maybe engage in a conversation about how do we begin to get transparency on all of the different measures that will lead to strategies. And I don't know if that's in the council meeting, if there's a separate council meeting, if there's some sort of a launching that you invite more people to. I'm just already thinking about implementation, so just thought I'd offer those thoughts, even though we're not done.
Right. So can we talk a little bit more about what might happen at a special meeting, or how you're defining the transparency? Is it the process or the outcome of the dashboard?
I think from my mind, it is the product that is created, the library. How do we, dive in and begin to see those the measures that relate to the library, and then the goals that they're relating to, because all of those should have an action strategy around them. Some of them will be very specific to, one entity, but anytime there's crossover, that's where I see an opportunity for some sort of a larger convening to really start getting people into groups to be thinking about that overall system work that needs to be happening, and how do we have either corresponding strategies or strategies that align together or dovetail together, depending on what they are, so that we're having the maximum impact.
Kim, this is Miriam.
Right.
I think that's how we see Raise Up Oregon. So we've defined the objectives and the strategies. So as we kind of work to implementation, that's what's going to move the needle on medium-term and ultimately long-term outcomes. I think the work that we do to develop an implementation plan together and a grid is the stuff that ultimately, what the council's role is, what agencies will lead, where they need support from other agencies, is ultimately what drives the work to move the outcomes.
Well, and it seems to me that Alyssa talked in an earlier meeting about setting up work groups or task forces. I'm not sure what word you used, Alyssa, as far as implementation goes, that would really be reflective of the cross-sector involvement that it's going to take to really make this plan work on the ground.
Yeah, I think we've all been a little bit behind on the implementation. I think everybody's had a roaring start to session, but that was sort of some of the talking that we'd started on is what needs to happen internally amongst agencies and what needs to happen at these council meetings. It gets into committee structure, all those bigger questions. But yeah, I think ultimately we want to make sure that whether there's existing work that we're capitalizing on or new work that we're trying to start with, it's going to be cross-sector regardless of its kind of current status.
This Donalda, this is also seems like where the hubs come in, because they have those cross-sectoral representation as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good point, Donalda.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think, Kim, and the reason I was asking Alyssa about that is I think what you're asking about is what I've heard Alyssa and Miriam talk about, that is the intention, that there will be those follow-up conversations. And I'm guessing it's going to be wherever the capacity is outside of the legislative session. But will be exciting.
Yes.
Very exciting. So, Measuring Success is meeting every month, correct, Bobby?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
It's next Wednesday, so I guess it's the first Wednesday.
Yeah, first Wednesday of the month, so they'll be meeting on the 6th. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, this is the work that we've all been sort of looking for, hoping for, I think, as far as really laying out what should our expectations be and, what are the standards and measurements that we want to hold ourselves accountable for. So this is an incredibly valuable document, and I understand it's in the works, in process, but really a wonderful overview. And thank you for all the hours many people are spending on this. Thanks. Okay, if there are no other questions on the Measuring Success Committee and the library, let's move on then to the legislative session update. And just looking at the information that was in our packet, there are obviously myriad bills that we are interested in, and those were just the early learning division focus bills. And I know each of our partners probably has an equal or longer list. So we'll start, I think, this conversation with Alyssa and Miriam, or David, giving us our update on early learning bills, and then invite our partners to share what their legislative session update is.
Thank you, Sue. Actually, I know that Housing, Chelsea Bunch hopped on the phone just for this update. So if it's all right, I was going to pivot to her real quick so she can get back to, I'm sure, legislative session and other things that she's working on, if that works.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Thank you, Chelsea.
No problem. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
We can even see you.
I know, I just am always amazed by this technology, so I really love this. And I really like this virtual meeting thing. This is cool. So thanks for letting me be part of it. Just quickly, let me see, where am I going to start here? So I think you all should have in the packet it's basically our brochure. It's like our legislative, it looks like this, although the digital version probably looks a little bit different. This essentially incorporates our legislative agenda, and then on the back it talks about our statewide housing plan, which I know you all have been hearing lots about. I think for this update, I will kind of highlight addressing children's homelessness because I think that that's the place where our agenda probably most best aligns. If you guys don't know, you guys are probably pretty familiar that we have some pretty historic investments in housing, I think, this legislative session. And so the governor's recommended budget is essentially asking for over $400 million in investment in housing, which is pretty incredible and definitely more than what we were thinking as an agency, but we're definitely up to the task. And I think in terms of how this aligns with our statewide housing plan, it very much so does. And it definitely is going to require some cross-sector and some collaborative efforts. So really kind of the key places in this legislative agenda for us is about ending children's homelessness, which there's a request for about $298 million and I'll get into that in a second. What I probably will not dive into just for time's sake is that we're also looking at investments of just over $54 million in investing in permanent supportive housing, but then also accelerating development in Greater Oregon. So essentially in rural and frontier Oregon, figuring out how we do more housing development and technical assistance with partners in rural and frontier Oregon, and looking at an investment of over $31 million there. So where I want to go back to is the Ending Children's Homelessness. And I thought I would just highlight, Alyssa had reached out to me last week about updating a slide from our last presentation that we did in the Children's Cabinet. And I think at that point, we were number 2 in the nation for unsheltered, for families who were experiencing homelessness in the state. Unfortunately, that has now increased to, we are now number 1, which is pretty horrible. And I don't know, on the front of this brochure, there's this little school bus, and over 21,000 school students are experiencing homelessness in Oregon, which is the equivalent to 302 high school buses, which is pretty incredible, and not in a good way. And so now we have the highest rate of houselessness in the country for families with kids. So really, our investments that we're really looking at, $130 million in increasing affordable housing, and that's like actual units on the ground. So we shared a little bit at the Children's Cabinet about our local innovation and fast track funds. And this is money that we've gotten the last couple of biennium to literally put units of affordable rental housing and now homeownership units on the ground. But the goal here is how we're serving communities of color and rural communities and frontier communities with these dollars. And it's a kind of a fast track way within a 36-month timeline to get families into affordable housing across the state. So we're looking at $130 million for the next biennium, which would be awesome. We're also looking at $50 million to increase the emergency housing account and state homeless assistance programs, and kind of leveraging the increase in the document recording fee to think about outcome-oriented practices. And so this is really thinking about the work that we're doing with our community action agency partners across the state, and just figuring out how we can work with them and really look at what are the outcomes that we're hoping to see when we're trying to like really house families who are experiencing homelessness. What I kind of would like to highlight is this $20.5 million ask where I think this is the one piece that really came from the work of the Children's Cabinet. And so this was figuring out how we can invest in increased coordination between our agency, Oregon Housing Community Services, and DHS, and more specifically the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And this is really, I think this investment is really looking to serve families who are literally homeless, experiencing homelessness, and like longer term subsidy for rental assistance and housing navigation, so that we can figure out how we can support families navigating really tight rental markets, and also adding some other links to other services, self-sufficiency services, TANF, and food stamp. Let's see, $20 million providing tenant and landlord protections. And again, this is really about figuring out how we are supporting families who are definitely navigating these tight and dynamic rental markets. And I won't go into too much depth about the $25 million, and so that's really about preserving existing publicly supported affordable housing. So those are housing units that already have a rental subsidy built within the units themselves, but maybe coming up for maybe in the next few years they're going to lose that subsidy. And so we're trying to figure out how we can preserve that and keep those affordable. But then also looking at the rental market for those units that might be how do I want to say this, that might have lower rent, but that doesn't mean that they have like a rental subsidy or rent restriction within it. But we want to figure out how we can acquire those and make them long-term, on a long-term basis, more affordable for families. So those are kind of our big investments that we're looking at in this biennium. Let's see, at the end of January, our director, Margaret, shared our agency overview and talked about our legislative asks with the House Committee on Human Services and Housing. And then, of course, we're definitely looking forward to additional presentations to upcoming legislative committees. Probably the biggest one is we're doing our budget note presentation to the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Transportation and Economic Development, and I believe that's March 18th. Sounds like that's going to be a 3-day thing. That's pretty crazy. I was thinking about some specific bills, and I was talking with our legislative coordinator, and I might need to do a little bit of follow-up on this because I don't think that there are specific bills that relate to our connection with early learning. There are some things that I did highlight that I certainly am wanting to keep track of. So thinking about Senate Bill 1, I think the goal for this is to establish a statewide system of care task force. Right now, it looks like it's pretty focused in on the Oregon Health Authority, Department of Human Services, and Oregon Youth Authority, and thinking about how kids are touching each of those systems and how those systems are working together, and looking at a data dashboard regarding youth who are served by all of those agencies. We are not specifically called out in that, nor is Department of Education. In my mind, kind of from a direct service perspective, I definitely think that we would need, as a housing agency, would need to be in the room for those conversations. So that's something that I'm requesting that our agency track, but we probably won't have a seat at the table on that task force. But thought it might be something that, just thinking about the connection between DHS and Oregon Health Authority might be something that you all may want to track as well. And then, so the other bill that I thought I would mention, again, it's not something that either of our organizations are called out specifically in, but think it's something that we probably should keep on our radar, is the House Bill 2986, and this is requiring Oregon Health Authority and coordinated care organizations partner with regional health equity coalitions. This is really thinking about health disparities for communities of color. Part of the role that I have here, part of my topic area is thinking about health equity, knowing that housing is a social determinant of health. And so I've kind of just been trying to build some relationship with there's 4 regional health equity coalitions across the state. And there's one out in Eastern Oregon that is in the process of kind of becoming a regional health equity coalition as we speak. So just trying to build some relationship there. Some of the health equity coalitions do have some connection to the local early learning hub. So, it just might be a place for all of us to be thinking about alignment and kind of how our programs are or not working with each other in that space. That was a whirlwind. I am sorry I am moving so fast. But that is what we have so far. There will likely be more updates probably at the next council meeting because I assume that the next one will happen after our budget note hearing as well.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. An aggressive agenda, of course.
We're all like, oh my God, this is so cool, but we're going to have to get ready, but excited.
Very, very exciting, and I appreciate the connection that you all are very aware of with all the work around children and families, so exciting. Any questions from council members before Chelsea has to leave and probably go back to the Capitol?
I got a phone call.
Okay, thank you very much, Chelsea. Appreciate your partnership.
No problem. Looking forward to continue to work with y'all. Take care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chelsea.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
And Sue, if it's okay, I know Candace prepared actually a short presentation for us. Candace, if you're still there and want to
Great.
pivot to you.
Yeah, I can do that. And mine is really, I'm not going to go through all of these. These are the major bills that we are tracking and watching. And so there's three of them in particular, I think, that apply to our work and that really cross over. And some of these, because ELD and ODE are really in that same umbrella space, there's some ELD bills in here that Miriam might speak to also, and so I'll let her do those. If you can go to the second slide. So the two big ones in this the department's focusing on are Senate Bill 12 and 13, that particular, or 12, I'm sorry, and 14. So 12 is really out of the Advisory Committee for Safe and Effective Schools for All Students. It's thinking about really creating inclusive and welcoming and safe classes and spaces for all of our students from birth to 21 when they leave us, both in special education and general education, thinking about more than safe schools in the historical context of safe schools was really locking the doors and creating the hard facility. And this is shifting a lot of the focus to thinking about the mental health and the social emotional well-being, and that the frequency of a student being bullied or harmed or traumatized in our schools is actually something that we're addressing and talking about as much as the issues around, the physical layouts around school safety, like school shootings and big violent acts. And so this work is really comprehensive, thinking about everything that encompasses the learning needs of a student to create an inclusive and safe environment. And so there's a lot of overlap with all of our goals in the ELC, and what does that look like as we go forward. So that's one. The other big one, Senate Bill 14, it's really focusing on a statewide education plan for a population that we've historically underserved in the department and across the state, and that's for students who are American Indians, Alaska Natives, who've experienced disproportionate results, and we see that. And so, and we see that in our Birth to 5 section. That's as well how we support families and we support educators and in the learning and understanding of all the components of that, both for technical assistance and curricula, is going to be part of this. And if you go down to the third one, the big one on this is House Bill 2026, and this is extending the pilot on trauma-informed care and approaches. And so we've had some districts have piloted this, and this is going to be wrapped up into what I talked about before in the Safe Schools pilot. So it's really thinking about the inclusion of all components around social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, mental health support, physical safety, all of those pieces like really come together in a holistic way to ensure that we have classes and schools that are safe. And so I think as I look at the work that we're going forward with and that we're really tracking and proposing, it's really tying to that connection of students and student-centered and keeping the holistic approach. That's what I've got, Alyssa.
Thank you so much, Candace, for putting this together.
Yep. Thank you, Candace. And you're right. Obviously, there's several on there that I'm guessing Alyssa or Miriam may talk about. Any questions of Candace from council members? Okay.
Great.
And we're back to you, Alyssa. Thank you, Candace.
Yeah. All right. So I know you've got the list in your materials, and I'll pull it up for you guys here as well. So I won't go through this whole large document, but I did want to highlight the three bills that were submitted on our behalf. So for House Bill 2024, that's relating to baby promise. It had its first public hearing, a week ago in the House Human Services and Housing Committee. It was dubbed Childcare Day, so all bills related to childcare were brought forward. There's some really great testimony. Bobby and Megan were able to present some of their findings as well. And so we're sort of on hold until the work session gets scheduled, but we've been working with Representative Kenny Geyer, who chairs that committee, and we'll let you know when that moves. Similarly, House Bill 2027 was included in the Childcare Day presentation. So we are working on some amendments to that bill, again, working with Representative Kenny Geyer on that, and we'll let you know when that moves forward. The other bill that we've been focusing on is House Bill 2025. It has been scheduled for a work session next week, and again, we've been working with the committee chair, Representative Doherty, on amendments to that bill, working with the hubs, working with EVA and some of our other partners to make sure that this bill is really reflective of what we're trying to do as we expand access to preschool. And so those will be moving, and I'm happy to send you guys an email with links once those move and we have hearings scheduled for those in case anyone wants to tune in. I'll also note, as Miriam mentioned in her director's report, the Joint Committee on Student Success has been convening. We gave a presentation last Tuesday. Sarah touched on the workforce along with Bobby and Megan, as well as Eva. And so that link is not included in this document since it happened this week, so I'm happy to send that out. As of right now, it looks like the committee is entering into a work session phase, and so we have not been asked to do any additional presentations. So they will be meeting tonight, as well as next week on Tuesday and Thursday from about 5 to 6:30 or 7 to, from what we understand, further discuss sort of all the presentations they've received as they work towards recommendations to the full Joint Committee on Student Success. We also had Miriam's presentation, her introduction at the Joint Ways and Means Education Subcommittee on Monday. It was great. I'm happy to send a link to that as well. Very strong. There really weren't a lot of questions. The committee seemed really interested in understanding our programs and how they operate. So that was a really successful presentation, and we'll let you know when she's been called back before that committee. As Candace knows, the Department of Education is still before that committee and will be there for at least another week, if not longer. So we'll be pulled back in as appropriate. For any other hearings you're interested in that we've presented at, that's where you'll see in this document, we have links to all of those presentations. So not only can you follow what's happening with the bills, but you can tune into the testimony that's been submitted in the presentations we've done. So I know it's a quick and high-level overview, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, obviously, this has been a very intense beginning to the legislative session for our staff. I've listened to a number of presentations that Miriam, David, Alyssa, and others have done, and they've just done a great job of really laying out for legislators that early investment is where you get your biggest return on investment. So staff's been doing a great job. All of these links that you included, Alyssa, in the agenda packet are really useful. It just makes it really easy to pop in and watch or see what happened in the past. So thank you for including all of those in our packet.
Yes, and I'll shout out to Sherry
for
making it readable.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. So I think from a council perspective, Alyssa, the question would be, where do you need our input, support, help as you look ahead to the next couple of weeks at the Capitol?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we mentioned last time, if there's any legislators that you have relationships with that are sitting particularly on the Joint Committee on Student Success, Ways and Means Education Subcommittee, that's where, the budgetary discussions will be happening. So far, we've only really just gotten into the process of weighing in on bills now that Joint Committee on Student Success, Early Childhood Education Subcommittee is wrapping up and some of that level setting is finishing. We're just now getting into that phase of bill amendments, of seeing bills move into work session. And so I think it's kind of our next phase of work. But I think the more you can sort of check in with your legislator, see if they have questions or concerns about any part of the system, whether it be preschool promise promise, hubs, or just the way the early learning division operates, directing those to us, sharing the Raise Up Oregon strategic plan, and I'm happy to get you copies. I think that's currently sort of the best approach with where we are right now.
Okay. And we haven't really talked about it today, but the whole issue of disseminating Raise Up Oregon, which is partly or largely happening with the help of our hubs right now. Any specific support that council members can give you there, Alyssa?
Yes, I think the biggest area right now that would be helpful is we've been getting a lot of requests, particularly from hubs, to present to their governance boards or to other stakeholder groups. And we're working on some materials that will be a little bit more comprehensive. But if I know a couple of you, Sue, Bobby, have been, and Terry have been asked to do a couple of these presentations. But we really want to show ownership of this plan beyond the early learning division. So you'll probably be seeing some emails from me if folks are free and available to participate remotely or in person at some of these hub governance boards. We'll supply you with a slide deck and talking points, but we really would want you guys to own this plan and eventually get the hubs and other partners to be able to speak to this plan on our behalf as well.
Okay, and I think Martha was covering Eastern Oregon, right? Last week, maybe.
Yes, yep, on Monday. So we're already moving on that. We are currently working on sort of identifying all the target audiences that you as council members sort of identified in the process over the course of the year, and just starting that process of who those audiences are and how to best reach them. So as we move down that path a little bit further, I'm sure we'll be coming back to you guys to get your input, and we'll definitely need your help on reaching all of those audiences at that time.
Okay, so I guess the message to council members is just watch for emails from Melissa.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Any other questions?
Or Kate
comments,
or Kim.
Information.
Kate or Kim, I don't know if you had any legislative updates you wanted to share or bills you wanted to mention.
So this is Kate. There's a lot going on in OHA, and as you know, we're pretty big and broad. I will say that in terms of the one bill that is particularly interesting, I think, for the council, the universally offered home visiting. Legislative Council is going to be amending that initial bill, Senate Bill 526. It was acknowledged that was just placeholder language. So we are doing our best to provide a lot of the information that they need. And just to be clear, there's sort of two parts to this. The part that we oversee within OHA and Medicaid was put forward in the governor's budget. And then this bill, Senate Bill 526, is really Senator Steiner Hayward's bill, and it's looking at how to engage the commercial health plans so that we reach true universal coverage for this. So be looking, that should pop out hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so, and then there'll be another round of hearings on that. But that's the one I know most intimately. So, but there's a whole lot of other stuff, behavioral health and Medicaid, and it's never a dull moment. So.
Yes.
Hi, this is Kim, and I can just share that in DHS we also are tracking lots and lots of bills. There are several on the list that you have in your packet that we're also tracking because they have an impact on self-sufficiency. One that you may want to know about that's not on the list that has somewhat of a crossover is House Bill 2032, which is a TANF bill, but a lot of the conversation has been around the success of TANF also has to do with childcare availability. So the technical piece of this bill is that it's actually a bill to suspend language that's been suspended since 2008. Long story that I won't go into. But what is happening now is we have a legislative work group that is working on making some decisions so that we can get out of this suspension language. And so there very well could be some kind of childcare connection that comes out of this. We've had 2 meetings. There's 2 more planned, and by the end of the 4th meeting, we are, as a group, supposed to have a proposal. So,
Great.
Wow. What's the timing on that, Kim? Do you know?
the timing on the work group?
Yes. Yeah, when you're going to have a proposal.
The work group has 2 more meetings. We're meeting every week. So next Thursday and the Thursday after. So by the end of that Thursday, we are supposed to have bill language together as a group.
Okay.
So this is Bobby. Kim, the suspensions, I wasn't following. Is it suspensions of recipients of a DHS program? What is the heart of this work group's focus?
So the heart of this is that we have a bill, 2032, that we put forward. We have put a similar bill forward every year since 2008 because in 2007 there was a package of bills that were passed for the TANF program, and then we immediately went into a recession and the budgets were cut and all of that new package was suspended. So they didn't want to remove it because they wanted to at some point fund those strategies and come back to them, which they never have. So we've been literally taking forward a package to suspend those bills, those elements of the package for a decade. So the work group is really now trying to true up and say, what should we be looking to do? What is an old strategy? What fits, what doesn't? And so that's the work we've been diving through.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
10 years. Wow. All right. Wouldn't want to move too fast in this arena. Oh my gosh. Okay, any other legislative updates from anybody? I know council members are at the Capitol a lot as well.
This is Danelda. I don't have the bill number, but there is a bill out there for hunger-free schools, universal meals, and then also for breakfast after the bell. Mm-hmm. The universal meals would be to cover all kids in school with free meals. So it's got a pretty healthy cost to it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But a very impactful activity if it can pass, because they identify that 1 in 3 kids don't get meals, don't eat lunch, or don't have food.
Wow. That's a high percentage.
High, very high,
okay.
Yes.
Any other bills or legislative activities that people want to mention? All right. So, Alyssa, any other business for the council today?
I think that's it. If you guys have no other questions, and like I said, I'm happy to follow up with those links to the hearings that have happened since we sent these materials out.
Great. I think the links would be good. Also, from the Measuring Success Committee, you were showing some slides here on the screen that weren't in our agenda packet.
Oh, the full.
So if you could just, the library.
This one? Yep, I'm happy to follow up with that. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful too. So our next council meeting is, sorry, Bobby?
Just a follow-up on the Measuring Success Library. If the kinds of questions Colleen and others raised, if people look at the library and those kinds of questions come, if they could send it to David, me, Tom, to any of us, that's a very helpful process that anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was, if they're getting the library, it's sending questions that you wonder if we've thought about, are we, will the measure cover, and all the kinds of things that were raised today.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bobby, for asking for that feedback. So our next council meeting is March 28th, I believe, right, Alyssa?
Yes, here in
And
Salem.
that will be in person in Salem. And we know part of the agenda will be the childcare rules that have been temporary. I'm sure there will be more legislative update information, and I'm not sure, other plan, hopefully Raise Up Oregon implementation activities that have been going on.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, and maybe we can meet some of the new staff that we read about or hear about as well, Alyssa.
Perfect. We'll make sure they're here.
Okay, sounds good. If there's no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for being on this call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks and goodbye.
Goodbye.